Have you ever experienced a dream where you weren't inside the story, but watching it? Not falling, not flying, not running, just observing. Like a silent witness sitting in a dark theater of your own mind, watching scenes unfold. People you don't recognize, places you've never been, conversations you never joined. You feel present, yet disconnected, conscious, yet strangely absent. These are not ordinary dreams, they are not nightmares, and they are not lucid experiences either. They are something far more unsettling. Dreams where you do not exist as a character, only as an invisible observer. No control, no interaction, only awareness. Why does the mind sometimes erase the dreamer from the dream? What mechanism turns you from participant into spectator? And what does that silent distance say about your consciousness, your memory, and the architecture of the dreaming brain? Tonight, we step into the rare and eerie realm of observer dreams, dreams you don't live, only watch. And once you understand what's happening behind the curtain of your own mind, you may never experience sleep the same way again. These dreams have a name in sleep research, although most people never hear it. Observer mode dreams. Unlike typical dreams, where you inhabit a body, make decisions, feel fear, desire, or movement, in observer dreams, the self is strangely absent. There is no I inside the narrative, no hands to move, no mouth to speak, no legs to run. Only vision, only awareness. You are not in the dream, you are watching it. Psychologists consider this a rare variation of dissociative dream imagery, where the brain produces a narrative without embedding the dreamer's ego inside it. It's as if the mind switches from first-person consciousness to third-person storytelling. What makes this phenomenon so fascinating is how quiet it feels. There is no fear, no excitement, just a strange neutrality, like watching fragments of someone else's memory or witnessing a scene that was never meant for you. People often report watching conversations between strangers, seeing unknown places in perfect detail, feeling like a camera floating through scenes, experiencing the dream without emotion or agency. And yet, upon waking, the experience feels strangely intimate, as if the mind was trying to show you something, without letting you touch it. This phenomenon touches the deepest layers of human dreaming, the separation between identity and perception. Because for most of our lives, we assume that consciousness is the center of experience, that you are always somewhere behind your eyes. But these dreams challenge that assumption. They suggest that the brain can generate reality-like narratives without placing a self inside them. That awareness can exist without identity, that you can be present without being someone. And that raises a far more unsettling question. If a dream can exist without you inside it, then what exactly is the you when you're awake? To understand why these observer dreams happen, we need to look at something deeply fragile in the human mind, the construction of selfhood. In everyday life, your brain constantly builds a sense of I. This is called the narrative self, a psychological structure created by memory, emotion, identity, and expectation. It is not a physical object. It is a story your brain tells itself every second. But during sleep, that story becomes optional. Modern psychology suggests that observer dreams emerge when the brain partially deactivates the ego simulation system, the part of the mind responsible for placing you inside your own mental experiences. This system is tightly linked to dreaming identity, emotional involvement, and the sense of agency. When that system quiets down, the dream doesn't stop. It simply continues, without you inside it. This is similar to a phenomenon called depersonalization, where waking individuals feel detached from their own body or thoughts, as if they're watching themselves from the outside. However, in observer dreams, this mechanism is more complete. Instead of watching yourself, you vanish entirely from the story. Psychologically, this can be triggered by high levels of cognitive fatigue, emotional overload, prolonged stress, dissociative tendencies, or highly analytical personality types. The mind, overwhelmed by inner tension, shifts away from emotional participation and into detached observation. It stops asking, "What am I doing?" and starts asking, "What is happening?" This creates a dream without involvement, a purely cinematic mental experience. Another key mechanism is suppression of affective processing. Emotional centers in the brain reduce their activity, resulting in dreams that feel emotionally flat. You don't fear, desire, or react. You simply witness. This is why these dreams often feel eerily calm. No heart racing, no sense of danger, no urgency, just quiet observation. From a symbolic standpoint, many psychologists interpret these dreams as moments when the psyche is attempting to distance itself from overwhelming personal narratives. Instead of inserting the self into conflict or emotion, the mind rehearses reality at a safe distance. It becomes a spectator to avoid being hurt. And here lies the psychological paradox. These dreams are not a lack of consciousness. They may be a deeper form of consciousness, one that exists before identity, before emotion, before ego. A mind that does not need to be someone in order to see. When these dreams occur, the brain enters a very unusual balance of activity, not fully engaged in identity, but not unconscious either. Scientifically, this phenomenon is most closely associated with REM sleep, the phase where vivid dreams are generated. During normal REM sleep, the brain activates visual and emotional centers while suppressing rational control and muscle movement. This is why dreams feel real, immersive, and embodied. But in observer mode dreams, the neurological pattern is different. Studies using functional brain imaging suggest a partial deactivation of the medial prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self-referential processing. This region normally answers questions like, "Is this happening to me? Where am I in this experience? What am I feeling?" When this area goes quiet, the sense of I dissolves. At the same time, visual centers in the occipital and temporal lobes remain highly active. This means the brain continues constructing scenes, movement, faces, and environments, but without anchoring them to a personal point of view. In other words, the brain becomes a projector without a protagonist. Another key player is the default mode network, DMN, a network of brain regions associated with self-reflection, autobiographical memory, and internal narrative. In typical dreams, the DMN is partially active, giving dreams a personal story-like quality. In observer dreams, connectivity within the DMN becomes fragmented. The brain continues to generate content, but loses the thread of personal identity. Neurochemically, these dreams are influenced by high acetylcholine levels, which intensify imagery, suppressed serotonin and norepinephrine, which weaken emotional grounding, altered dopamine signaling, which reduces motivation and action impulses. This combination creates a strange mental environment. Your brain can see, your brain can imagine, your brain can construct stories, but your brain does not place you inside them. Some neuroscientists compare this to a simulation without a player avatar. The engine runs, the world renders, the story progresses, but the character you normally inhabit does not load. Interestingly, similar patterns are observed in certain meditative states and sensory deprivation experiments where individuals report feeling like pure awareness without form, location, or identity. This suggests that observer dreams may reveal something profound. Your brain can generate consciousness without selfhood. It can see without being someone who sees. And that raises a dangerous possibility for the waking mind. If your sense of self can disappear in sleep while experience continues, how stable is your identity when you're awake? Although observer dreams feel rare and personal, science has encountered them, quietly, cautiously, in research laboratories and sleep clinics around the world. One of the earliest scientific accounts comes from the 1970s, when sleep researcher Dr. William Dement documented reports of patients describing dreams in which they felt like a camera floating through a story. At the time, these experiences were dismissed as minor anomalies. But modern sleep science began taking them seriously when brain imaging technology evolved. In a landmark study at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development, researchers monitored subjects who reported frequent third-person and observer-style dreams. Using EEG and fMRI, they discovered an unusual pattern: heightened visual cortex activity combined with suppressed activity in regions tied to body ownership and perspective-taking. In simple terms, the brain was painting vivid worlds, but refusing to assign a body to the mind. Another fascinating set of experiments occurred at Stanford's Center for Sleep and Dream Research, where subjects were exposed to emotional stress and cognitive overload before sleep. A percentage of them began reporting dreams where they were not inside, but watching from nowhere. These dreams had common features: no physical body perception, no ability to speak or move, no emotional urgency, a strong sense of clarity and distance. Even more disturbing were cases linked to trauma survivors. In several documented cases, individuals with a history of psychological trauma began experiencing observer dreams frequently. Therapists observed that these dreams appeared to be the brain's defensive adaptation, creating distance between the self and the emotional center of experience. Rather than reliving fear, pain, or identity, the mind chose to observe without attachment. A real documented case involves a French psychology student who reported recurring dreams where he watched unknown families living normal lives. He described never feeling fear, only a quiet sense of being outside existence. After neurological testing, researchers found altered activity in his temporoparietal junction, a brain region involved in perspective and self-location. The conclusion was not pathological, it was adaptive. The brain had learned to survive by stepping back from itself. Even modern sleep studies show that experienced lucid dreamers sometimes lose their dream body entirely and transition into observer state. When questioned, they described the shift not as fear, but as becoming the space that watches. Interestingly, similar states have been reported by long-term meditation practitioners, monks, and individuals practicing sensory isolation techniques. Different paths, same destination. A mind that sees without being. Science doesn't yet fully understand why this happens, but what it does understand is this: these dreams are not random. They are not meaningless, and they are not fictional. They are windows, rare and fragile, into how consciousness can exist without identity. And perhaps, how fragile the illusion of self really is. There is something quietly terrifying about a dream where you do not exist. Not as fear, not as pain, but as a question. Because when you wake up from these dreams, you return to a body, a name, a history, a face in the mirror. And yet, for a few silent moments of the night, you were nowhere, and you were still aware. You saw without eyes, you perceived without form. You existed without identity. Modern psychology tells us that the self is not a solid object, but a fragile process. A story the brain keeps telling so that reality feels personal, grounded, and real. But observer dreams reveal something else: that the mind can function without that story. That awareness does not require a character. That experience does not demand a name. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not that you sometimes watch dreams without participating, but that the part of you which watches is older, quieter, and deeper than the part that acts. Tonight, when you close your eyes, ask yourself this: if your mind can create worlds without placing you inside them, then who is really watching when you are awake? And what happens when that watcher becomes silent? Sleep well.